Hello, and welcome to the presentation on Chapter 5, which covers drafting and revising, creative thinking, and critical thinking. In this presentation, we will cover the following topics. I'm not going to cover all the topics that are in the chapter, although you are responsible for reading about them. What is revision? When does revision occur? Myths about revision. Can I learn to improve my revision skills? Preparing to draft, sometimes saving hints. Procrastination, enemy of critical thinking, thief of time. A revision process for your drafts. A final checklist for your essay. And finally, some last advice, how to play with your mental blocks. So what is revision? Well, revision is a thinking process that occurs anytime you are working on a writing project. It can occur at the beginning, it can occur in the middle, it occurs throughout. In fact, we'll talk about that in the next slide. It requires that you look at your writing with a fresh eye. And in fact, if you look at the word revision, you'll see that's what it means. Vision, of course, meaning to see, and meaning again. So the revision process is the process by which you are constantly looking and re-looking with new eyes at what you've written, with the goal to see how you can improve and produce the best essay that you can. When does revision occur? Well, as the previous slide implies, revision occurs throughout your writing process. It occurs before drafting, it occurs during drafting, it occurs between parts of drafts, and at the end of drafts. In other words, you should be in a constant state of revision. You want to make sure when you're working on an essay, and I noticed, I've noticed this in my own writing, that you set the essay aside, regardless of what you have done on it, how far you've gotten along. And then before you begin working on the essay again, it is important to go back and look and see what you've already written and see how you can make changes prior to continuing with the essay. You need to make sure that you are always setting your essay aside and then coming back to it, because the time between writing and then looking is essential. If you try to revise right after writing, you're going to not find anything. It's amazing how problems and issues don't present themselves immediately after writing. What you've written, you feel like it's great. But when you set it aside for a while, a few hours or ideally a day, you'll be surprised at what strikes your eyes when you go back and look at it. Okay, here are some more hints. If your ideas are flowing well, but you realize you need some more supporting evidence for some of your points, consider leaving some blank spots to fill in later. Remember, you're drafting. You don't have to have everything covered. If you find that you need to develop something more, but you don't want to stop the flow of your writing in order to take time to brainstorm and develop that, leave it and come back to it. You can always do that. If you do decide to rewrite or omit something, such as a sentence or an entire passage, in a handwritten draft, mark a single X or line through it lightly. Don't spend a lot of time scratching things out. You're spending too much time on the negative. You want to simply strike and move on. If you begin with a handwritten draft, do eventually work on a print copy. Okay, at some point you need to switch over. Don't make the printed copy the last thing you do. Always keep your notes, your outlines, your drafts, and an extra copy of your final paper. This is very important. You always want to have your materials, especially when you turn in, let's say, for example, the essay that's due on Monday. You know that you're going to rewrite it. Keep your notes, your outlines, your drafts, keep all of that material. And that way, when you look at it, you read the rubric comments, you can go back, look at your notes, and see if there's anything there that you might be able to pull from and then add to improve your essay. And then in the drafting stage, before you start moving towards the final product, don't get hung up on the details. Remember, you're working to develop. It's a process. It's a step-by-step matter. And so, again, don't get hung up on the details. You will have time to work on the details. Now, this is going to take you backwards a little bit, but it will prepare you for the other essays you're going to write. I'm going to talk a little bit now about drafting. Again, remember, of course, revision is something that occurs even in the drafting process. But let's talk about drafting. Some people like to draft their essays longhand. So if you are doing that, if you're handwriting your first drafts, always write on one side of your paper in case you want to cut and tape together portions of the drafts, or if you want to experiment with interchanging different parts of a particular draft. For example, if you have one sheet of paper with a paragraph on it, another sheet of paper with a paragraph on it, you have it a certain order. If you want to see what it reads like by inverting them, you simply rearrange the paper. Also leave big margins on both sides of any handwritten pages. This allows you to jot down information or ideas as they occur in the course of reading through the draft. It's the same thing like making notes in the margin of a book. And then, in addition, devise a system of symbols if you can. This is a little bit more sophisticated, but circles, stars, checks, asterisks, that will remind you of changes you want to make later, a kind of shorthand. Okay, and here are some more some time-saving hints. If your ideas are flowing well, but you realize you need more supporting evidence for some of your points, consider leaving some blank spots to fill in later. You don't have to write everything all at once. If you do decide to rewrite or omit something, a sentence or an entire passage in a handwritten draft, mark a single X or line through it lightly. Don't worry or spend energy scratching. If you begin with a handwritten draft, eventually you will want to work on a printed copy, on a computer. Always keep your notes, outlines, drafts, and an extra copy of your final paper. That's very important. And finally, when you're drafting, don't get hung up on details. If you're having some problems with something, move on and come back to it later. Okay, let's talk about a few tips regarding writing with computers. Some of these are all fairly important, so please pay close attention. To avoid the agony of delete, always save what you have composed every 10 minutes or so, and consider printing out your work or copying it to a portable storage device after each drafting session in case your system crashes or gobbles your pages. I have here added to that particular suggestion the note, as an LSUE student, you also have free, unlimited access to Google Docs, which will allow you to access your work from anywhere. So I do encourage you to use that opportunity given to you. Again, it's free of charge and you have unlimited storage. If you need information on how to access your the account or how to set up an account, contact the Office of Information Technology. There is a link at the bottom of your class page, I think. But if not, there is also a link available, yes, there's a link available on our LSUE homepage as well. So contact OIT if you want to take advantage of that, which I very much encourage that you do. Yes, this saving after 10 minutes or so is always a good idea. I sometimes don't follow it, and I have paid the price. I remember one time when I was an undergrad, I was at McNeese, and I worked on McNeese paper, and I had a column, and it was a very lengthy column. I had an entire page to fill, and I was working on it Sunday night. It was due first thing Monday morning, and I was working. It was about 10, I guess, night, 9:30, 10 o'clock. And all of a sudden, as I'm almost finished, I'm on the last paragraph. I've written probably about 2 pages single spaced. And then all of a sudden, the lights went out and came back up in the office. The computer screen, and it was an old computer, this is one of these DOS things, it just boom, collapsed into this point of light in the center of the screen. And one of our photographers yelled at me saying, "Save it, save it, save it." I said, "It's too late. I've already lost it." And then all the electricity on campus went out. Turns out that there's a transformer on campus, and a raccoon bit into one of the wires, fried himself, but we didn't have school the next day, thank God, because I had to spend the next day, all of it, rewriting my column. So please, let my tragedy be a kind of warning to you. Save repeatedly, and that way you will avoid the agony I did experience. All right, so now, of course, I have to address the issue of procrastination, which is the bane and yet the companion of all college students' existences. Um, do I procrastinate at times? Yes, I do. When I was a student, did I procrastinate? Yes, I did. I know that you're going to procrastinate, and I know that no amount of my telling you why you shouldn't procrastinate is going to necessarily keep you from doing it. But I can tell you one thing, and this is one of the reasons why I try not to procrastinate anymore. The more you procrastinate, the worse your situation becomes. In writing, as we're talking about, this is a process, and you want to give yourself as much time as possible to develop the essay, to make mistakes and to correct those mistakes. So here are a few tips to help you out. Okay, one, as soon as you receive and understand your assignment, break your writing tasks into parts. Now, as you're working, you might want to promise yourself a carrot or a reward if you successfully complete an item on your list. And having a checklist is not a bad idea either. Even if the gift to yourself is as small as a coffee break or a short walk outside. I don't know. You might want to think of something a little bit more exciting, but not something that takes you too far away from the assignment at hand. Now, you have got to isolate yourself. Okay, you have to leave your friends. You have to close your door. You need to turn off the phone and the TV. Are you going to do all of that? I don't know. But you need to concentrate. And if your generation is the multitasking generation, you're the multitasking generation at the expense of, in my experience, the ability to concentrate for a long period of time. So you need to establish the situation where you are allowed, you allow yourself to concentrate. Do not allow yourself to check email, use social media pages, etc. Now, if you want to jump on Facebook or whatever it is that you want to do, I don't know. I don't pretend to be young, but if you want to get on social media after you've finished a task, that can be your carrot. That might not be a bad idea. Sometimes it is effective, as this example demonstrates, to use a kind of before and after scenario. If you're going to write about something, you might want to talk about how the circumstances were before the something happened. Now, in this particular example, the use of first person, the use of I, is discouraged, if not forbidden, depending on the assignment, in this particular class. So I would not encourage you to do that. However, as you can see, this is nevertheless a well-written, although short, introductory paragraph. I used to search for toast in the supermarket. Okay, the joke there, of course, is there's no toast in the supermarket. All right, that's because he overcooks everything. He didn't look for bread, looks for toast. I used to think blackened, as in blackened Cajun shrimp, referred to the way I cooked anything in a skillet. Okay, I get it. poached could only have legal ramifications because he can't poach an A. He can only think about poaching wildlife. So in other words, he's a bad cook. He's given us some humorous examples of how bad a cook he is. However, he says, but all that changed. Attending a class in basic cooking this summer has transformed the way I purchase, prepare, and even talk about food. So we see attending a class in basic cooking is the subject, and the transformation, the change from being a bad cook and being ignorant about food to his this new knowledge that he has is the controlling idea. And then he also incorporates an essay map in the thesis statement. So we see here purchase, prepare, and talk about food. So we know that the first paragraph is going to deal with how it changed the way he purchased. The second paragraph, how he changed the way he prepared. And then finally, how he now talks about food in comparison to how he used to.